only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, after declaring she detests the Tories, Nicola Sturgeon once again used her delusional independence bid as a smokescreen for her nasty and dangerous politics.
On 19th October next year, there will be an independence referendum.
But is bashing the Conservatives no longer enough to keep the failing First Minister out of the firing line and in power? I'll analyse whether today's SNP's conference speech marks a turning point for Sturgeon in my digest next. Then I'll get the thoughts of my superstar panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the I newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and political commentator and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. It's not just Sturgeon Liz Truss has to worry about. She unfortunately still has enemies, even close to home. So as Tory ministers prepare to ambush the PM over benefits, do they need to unite behind her or face killing off the party? That's our big debate at 10. Plus, has the once close relationship between Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng broken down for good? And if so, who is to blame? Well, the Daily Mail's Stephen Glover thinks the Chancellor, his friend of 25 years, needs to take responsibility. He's uncancelled at 10:45. Just Stop Oil were back to their usual nonsense today, and once again, they were all mouth and no answers.
Know what percent of global emissions the UK is responsible for?
But we're a world leader. Do you know what percentage the UK is responsible for?
Hang on a minute. Answer that question first.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
try.
small.
But after activists complain of injuries, is it right to physically remove them from the road? Comedian Jim Davidson gets the last laugh on the woke as he tackles this and more of today's outrageous stories in The Outsider at 9:50. As it's claimed, the new series of The Crown will depict Prince Philip having an affair just 2 months after Queen Elizabeth's death. Are the Be Kind Sussexes the ultimate hypocrites for standing by Netflix? Meghan's biographer Tom Bower is here on the latest twist in royal revelations. Plus, after going viral for his comments about Meghan's tears when he last appeared here on the day of the Queen's funeral, does he feel vindicated by this?
Now make yourself cry. Yeah. Oh, I can do that so well. Oh my God, it's crazy. You're like, Meghan, one tear, left eye, go.
Tom Bower reacts live at 10:20. The backwards left promoting the return of racial segregation. Nigel Farage weighs in on the shocking case of white people being banned from Black History Month's event at 9:40. His Home Secretary Suella Braverman right to reportedly consider making cannabis a Class A drug. Darts ace Bobby George, who investigated legalising marijuana for a major TV project, says it's wrong to treat the, quote, gateway drug the same as cocaine and heroin. He's ready and raring to go in tonight's clash at 9:25. I'll get you a verdict to go too. Plus, adds campus wokery runs rife with institutions across the country decolonising subjects including business, chemistry and thermodynamics. Are our mollycoddling universities teaching the next generation how to be offended? And a true comedy legend, the man behind Fawlty Towers and Monty Python, John Cleese, is coming to GB News.
To say it's a right-wing channel, it's a free speech channel.
So why are the rabid left trying to silence one of our best-loved stars by demanding, don't mention the culture war? We'll look at that and all of the day's top stories in the media bus at 10:30. We'll have tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way too. And will it be a Yeezy win for Kanye West as I name tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass from my panel's nominees? This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. A major new documentary film exposing the terrifying consequences of the now shuttered controversial Tavistock clinic has been released this month. And this very show features in the trailer. Their answer is to prescribe you at how old? At 16 years old. 16 years old, puberty blockers.
And they've said things like, I transed hundreds of kids and I don't think any of them should have been trans.
We're giving, 19 years old the same drugs that are used to chemically castrate sex offenders.
Children were being diagnosed as being trans very quickly without any proper investigation. I decided to write a report. When they saw it, they tried to stop me.
So that film is called No Turning Back. It's out this month and features whistleblowers revealing how doctors and experts fast-tracked confused youngsters into taking the same drugs that are used to chemically castrate sex offenders. It's going to be a very disturbing must-watch. Now, my verdict on why scheming Sturgeon is in a delusional mode right now. That's coming up in my digest next. Then my superstar panel weigh in. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone is here. So too, senior reporter for the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth and the former Brexit Party MEP and political campaigner Belinda de Lucy. But before all of that, the news at 9 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening to you. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, says Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities are a sign of Vladimir Putin's desperation following a series of setbacks by his military forces. It comes after officials said at least 12 people have been killed and more than 80 injured as the Kremlin launched its biggest airstrike since the start of the war in February. President Biden has also condemned the attacks, saying it highlights the brutality of Putin's war machine. President Zelensky says work is now underway to rebuild.
Now, across the whole country, restoration works are ongoing. We will restore all objects which were damaged by today's strike of Russian terrorists. It is only a question of time. I set a task for all structures of our state to work so that the restoration would be as fast as possible.
Well, for his part, Russia's President Vladimir Putin says he thinks it was right to retaliate after an explosion badly damaged a Russian bridge and military supply line to the illegally occupied Crimea at the weekend. Putin accused Ukraine of a terrorist attack on the bridge, warning that if attacks continued against Russia, there'd be more retaliatory strikes on Ukraine. Here, Scotland's First Minister says she's going to hold an independence referendum on the 19th of October next year if the UK Supreme Court approves it. Closing the SNP conference in Aberdeen today, Nicola Sturgeon said leaving the UK would lead to better relationships with England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Ms Sturgeon also said Scotland would rejoin the European Union. Well, the Supreme Court is due to hear legal arguments this week before deciding if Holyrood has the required powers to legislate for a second vote. Now, the Chancellor has been bowing to pressure to bring forward his much-anticipated medium-term fiscal plan. Last week, in an exclusive interview with GB News, Kwasi Kwarteng said he was going to stick to the original publishing date in mid-November, but today, in a letter to the chairman of the Commons Treasury Committee, he said it'll now be brought forward and published on October the 31st. Police investigating a triple stabbing which took place in Bishopsgate in central London last Thursday have now arrested a 25-year-old man. Witnesses reported seeing a phone robbery in which 2 or 3 masked knifemen attacked a pedestrian. Members of the public tried to intervene and 3 people ended up with stab injuries. The suspect was arrested this morning in North London. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time to go back to Dan Wootton Tonight.
Today at the SNP party conference, Nicola Sturgeon presented herself as some sort of Pollyanna-ish uniter. Despite being one of the most divisive policies in recent political history, Scottish independence, she laughably insisted, would bring the nations of the United Kingdom closer together. What sparked this wave of niceties from the nastiest political leader in Britain? Well, it was this revealing moment on the BBC yesterday, when scheming Sturgeon unwittingly showed her true colours.
Who would you rather have as Prime Minister? Well, that's not a difficult question. I mean, if the question to me is, would I prefer a Labour government over a Tory government? I detest the Tories and everything they stand for, so it's not difficult to answer that question.
And she wonders why Liz Truss hasn't picked up the phone. Of course, if such a phrase had been uttered by someone on the right, there would be overwhelming outrage about extremism sweeping British politics. But as ever, the Be Kind left don't give a damn if hate is directed at those they disagree with. It was left to Scottish Tories to rightly point out just how dangerous such rhetoric is. This is what Scottish MP Russell Finlay had to say.
First Minister, your words are dangerous, and I fear the day when they incite nationalist violence. How dare you both? How about you start trying to fix Scotland's many problems instead of stoking division and hate?
Donald Cameron, the Scottish Tory Shadow Constitution Secretary, added, Nicola Sturgeon should be more careful and respectful in the language she uses. Responsible politicians should be able to disagree without resorting to inflammatory language about hating their opponents. By saying she detests the Conservatives and everything we stand for, she is, by inference, insulting the 630,000 plus Scots who voted for us at last year's Scottish Parliament elections. Ruth Davidson, the former Scottish Tory leader, tweeted with Nicola Sturgeon's detest the Tories line earlier, there is clearly a rhetoric-raising strategy this SNP conference in order to other and traduce a quarter of the Scottish voting population. As usual, though, what I think Sturgeon is really doing is masterfully distracting from the real issues at hand, like the fact a majority of Scots are opposed to her plans to hold a second referendum on independence next year, according to a new poll by Observance. Like the fact Sturgeon is being called out by J.K. Rowling for being a destroyer of women's rights over her self-ID ban. And like the fact she crumbles at the slightest hint of media scrutiny about her delusional plans, as in this rare moment from Peter Smith of ITV News, who riled her by pointing out her rank hypocrisy over independence and then embarrassing her by exposing her complete inability, total inability, to name one expert who supports the case for independence. Watch.
Should people be wary of political leaders who plough on with what they personally believe is right, even when the experts warn that it will be disastrous for the economy, pensions and mortgages?
I'm trying to wonder where you're going with this question. I mean, I think you need to get a bit more subtle in your prefaces to questions, of course, because that's not what I'm doing in terms of an independence referendum. But
there are experts who say that would be disastrous.
Yeah, sure, and there's experts that say the other thing, and we weigh these things up.
Which experts say that independence would boost mortgages and pensions and the economy?
Well, I'm not going to get into naming names of, but this is a decision. The thing here is independence.
I haven't met any of them.
Well, maybe you need to get out a bit more.
How incredible to finally see Sturgeon receive the sort of challenges from the MSM that has been desperately lacking for many years. I mean, for the past 2 years, I have implored others to ask Sturgeon about post-independence monetary policy, for example, because she doesn't come on this show and she bans any member of the SNP coming on this show, unbelievably. Peter actually did it.
Your policy on currency would tie Scotland to the monetary policy of the UK, which you've derided.
We would continue to use the pound, which is our currency as much as it is the rest of the UK's, for a period while we established a Scottish central bank.
I'm not trying to convince you, no one will ever convince you that independence is a bad thing, First Minister, but can you at least be honest with people on this point, that if Scotland were independent right now, under the monetary policy and economic policy that you're proposing, it would be really, really bad for people. You wouldn't have any control over inflation. You'd be exposed to the storm without any shelter.
Peter, people in Scotland have no control over these things right now.
But you have representation.
Independence would give us the ability to chart our course to a point where we do have control over these things.
Oh, what rubbish. Let's just be clear. There is no plan. Sturgeon's vision of a financially independent Scotland is nothing more than a mirage. But as she told the conference today, she doesn't care. She doesn't care as long as she stays in power.
For as long as I am First Minister. By the way, conference, I intend that to be for quite some time yet. If the court decides in the way we hope it does, on 19th October next year, there will be an independence referendum.
So that desire to stay in power with no credible plan for delivering independence is why all she can do is spread anti-Tory hate and hope Scots are happy to overlook what a terrible job the SNP have done of governing. As the Spectator's editor Fraser Nelson wrote today, how many politicians say they actually detest their rivals? Why invoke hatred as a motivating political force? And isn't it hard to do so if you pose as an inclusive, warm, smiling party? To respond now, my superstar panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and former MEP and political campaigner Belinda de Lucy. Carol Malone, we saw the real Sturgeon in that BBC interview, didn't we? Not the nicey, I'm so sweet conference speech. We saw the real Sturgeon yesterday.
These are not measured words for a supposed stateswoman and for a leader of a political party, the First Minister of Scotland. You know, as the MP said, this woman is very dangerous. She knows that what she said is likely to incite violence. She knows this because, like the rest of us, we all look at social media when the Nats are on and when they're abusing people, their vile rhetoric, the threats they make to people. What does she think is going to happen with her having said that? What does she think is going to happen to Tories in Scotland and everywhere now that she said that? She's too smart. You know, what she's pushing here is xenophobic nationalism. You know, patriotism is the love of your country. Nationalism, let me tell you what George Orwell said about nationalism. He said, it's identifying oneself with a single nation and placing it beyond good and evil and recognising no other duty than advancing its interests. And that's what she is. And you're right, she has to keep... She's talking about there being a referendum. No, there can't be a referendum because it's against the law currently. And unless that gets changed, she can't have one. But she has to advance this argument down because it's the only thing that justifies her existence. The Nats, the people, her paymasters are pushing her, which is why she keeps on doing this. But she's not listening to the people of Scotland. The people of Scotland do not want a referendum on October the 19th, 2023. They have said loudly and clearly they don't want it. Only 35% of Scots want it, and there'll be the people at her conference there today. They're her acolytes. They want it. But the majority don't. They told her that in 2014. Every poll over the past year, I'd say year and a half, before the Queen's death, but particularly after the Queen's death, have said they do not want independence. They want to be part of the UK. And do you remember that scene last week on the show? You showed a film of her. She was in Dunfermline, King Charles was there, and she was being booed by
But again,
people
the media
who want to
ignore
stay
all of
within
that,
the
don't they, because it's Sturgeon. Look, Benjamin, the thing that I find so disturbing is that if this was a politician on the right, you just know there would be uproar about the fact that they were inciting violence, because you've got to concede. Sturgeon was inciting violence there, wasn't she?
I mean, I think inciting violence is a slight exaggeration, but it's not helpful language to use.
No.
But, I mean, you know, we have had years and years of this kind of rhetoric from politicians across the board. You know, there are plenty of Brexit-supporting people on the right who embraced language of enemies of the people for people that had a different view on how Brexit should be interpreted in the last couple of years. And I think that, you know, I thought that was totally wrong. And I think that, you know, what's odd about Nicola Sturgeon's choice to say that she detests Tories. I mean, look, of course she detests the policy decisions. That's the nature of why she has a political party she leads with the opposite views. But one of the big problems that they had in the last Scottish referendum was, as Carol referenced, the cyber nats, the sort of online bullies that did more harm than good because they became so notoriously aggressive. Now, they tried to tone that down afterwards. They tried to say Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon, they tried to say we recognised it wasn't OK. Well, language like that...
Oh, it's bubbling.
It's only going to encourage them, and that's going against persuading people to her cause.
And she knows what she's doing.
The reason that they thought they were going to win in the last referendum was because the people who wanted to stay in the union were too scared to voice their views publicly, because the minute they did, they got piled on by the Nats, and so they kept it quiet, which was why the result was a massive shock for them. But this, Sturgeon knows that MPs are getting killed now. We know what happened last year. So she knows that, and yet she's inciting, whether she's actually inciting violence, she knows this will trigger some of her followers.
But Belinda, I don't detest anyone who has a different political view.
No, neither do I. I think you'll find that more on the right. I think we have a real link to our countrymen, whether they vote Labour, Conservative, Remain, Brexit. I still feel a duty towards them. I think that's lost on the left now. They see opposition as enemy. And the thing about Nicola Sturgeon, her nationalism doesn't even make sense. She wants to claw back control from Westminster just to hand it on a silver platter to the EU. So you have to look underneath. If it's not about independence, because rejoining the EU goes against that,
and wasn't
it
it
is
beautiful
about
to
hatred.
see that ITV reporter, because, she gets a free ride. She goes on the media all the time. Finally, someone actually pulled her up on monetary policy, because I've been saying for years, ask her about the currency, because there is no plan. Oh, what, we're going to keep using the pound? How?
Well, this is the thing as well. To rejoin the EU, they'd have to have their own currency or sign up to the euro. They can't sell that.
It has to be the euro. They're not rejoining the EU for numerous years, but as an independent Scotland. But if they want to, they would absolutely have to adopt the
Exactly. There's a big difference between good nationalism and bad
don't
nationalism. She's chosen bad.
I mean, there's no chance of Scotland joining the EU because Spain would veto it.
Of course.
Because if they tried to do that, then Catalonia would try and do the same
another
thing.
chapter of the delusion. I completely agree with that. But even if you were to put that issue to one side, they're never going to let Scotland join until Scotland adopted the
but
euro.
Also they wouldn't. You have to have a requirement on your debt ratio for your economy, and they don't go anywhere near meeting it.
Of course.
And one of her MPs today had the cheek to say that they want to get out of the UK because we're dragging the economy down. Has anyone looked at Scotland's economy recently? It is a basket case, thanks to Sturgeon. There is no growth there. There is no productivity. They are trillions in debt. Their GDP is a way bigger percentage.
And I watched that entire conference speech today, and there were no solutions.
No.
She got a big applause for saying, we're not going to frack. Oh, well done. So you're literally presenting a policy about how not to become energy independent.
Dan, they've bullied the North Sea oil out of existence. That would be really useful to us right now, and it's never going to be used to help this country. Her Greens and her coalition, they're now trying to destroy the whisky industry, one of the biggest industries in Scotland. So this woman is ruining...
And that's just from you, right?
Yeah. But she's wrecking Scotland.
Yeah, and the highest alcohol deaths in the whole of the UK,
in Scotland,
beyond anywhere else. None of this is
drug deaths in Europe. I mean, highest drug deaths in Europe. Not a mention of that.
No.
Not any idea about how to turn any of that around, because what does she want to do? She wants to spread hate against the Conservatives because it is her only path to victory. And it's pathetic.
Who keeps bailing her out when she makes all these economic
the UK government.
The Tories, exactly.
The UK government, time and again. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, Belinda DeLucy, my superstar panel, and they will be with me all night, but also still to come. The backwards left promoting the return of racial segregation. Nigel Farage weighs in as white students are banned from a university during Black History Month. He's live at 9:40. But first, does Home Secretary Suella Braverman right to reportedly consider making cannabis a Class A drug? Dartsays Bobby George, who investigated legalising marijuana for a major TV project, goes head-to-head with lawyer and broadcaster Rebecca Jane and Conservative Women editor Kathy Gingell. But as ever, your opinion matters most to me, so email me, dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me using the handle @gbnews. Our poll running there too, the results and the clash coming up after a very short break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness, mate.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Time now for The Clash. And Suella Braverman is reportedly receptive to the idea of upgrading cannabis to a Class A drug amidst concerns it has become a gateway. A source told the Sunday Times that the Home Secretary is alarmed at evidence linking the drug to mental health issues and believes scaring people through proper deterrence is crucial to cutting its popularity among teenagers. But Braverman is also said to be conscious of the extra pressure a change to the classification of cannabis would heap on already stretched police forces. In Downing Street today played down the report, saying the government has no current plans to change the law relating to cannabis. But what do you think? Is Suella Braverman right to consider making gateway drug cannabis a Class A? Send me your thoughts to Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews while you're there. Go and vote in our poll. The results shortly, but help you make your mind. Doing battle tonight, let me bring in former professional darts legend Bobby George, who investigated this topic for a major TV documentary called Gone to Pot. The author, lawyer and broadcaster Rebecca James, and conservative woman editor Kathy Gingell. So, Bobby George, I have to say, I love you, but I completely disagree with you on this. I have seen, Bobby, so many lives in my own circles ruined by marijuana. Just completely destroyed, Bobby.
Well, I've done a programme for ITV called Gone to Pot. I went to America for 3 weeks, and I've been round marijuana for years, but a lot of people smoke it. I never bothered. I went there, I'm doing a documentary on it, so I tried every joint you can think of. I was high as a kite for 3 weeks. Quite enjoyable. But the government actually grow it there. So you've got no pesticides in it, it's grown properly. It tastes nice. They even got a smell of lemon, not that horrible smell. But trouble is with marijuana, there's people growing it, and they're mixing stuff with it. They're growing it and they're putting pesticides on it, and it's not good for your system. But if the government grow it, it's good. Now, if the government grew it, right, and they said you've got to be 21 to have it, when you've got a snake, you cut its head off, it's poisonous, don't you, to get rid of the snake, so it doesn't hurt you. Well, if the government grew it and they actually controlled it properly, it would stop all the gangsters, whatever you want to call it, drug barons, bringing it in the country, making it stops that. And that's why they've done it in America. So the politicians saying they should make it a Class A drug, they want to go to America, because America's miles in front of us with the drugs. And there's, 18 or 19 states now that's legal.
Yeah, but Rebecca Jane, my view, just because America's doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing.
Well, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm only saying what I see. When I went to America, I met a lady with she had breast cancer. She had it taken away. She got it back. They went to a herbal specialist, which is a marijuana doctor. She had it, and it went. And she called
Look, let me be clear.
She called it the plant of life.
Let me be clear. For medicinal purposes, I have always said I'm in support. But Rebecca Jane, my concern is that if you go down this path of wanting to legalise marijuana, actually, what's next? You'll end up being able to buy cocaine, heroin and ecstasy tablets and boots within 20 years' time. No, Rebecca, I say we get tough on the scourge of drugs. Why not make it a Class A?
Dan, I think this is the first time I've ever disagreed with you.
Well,
in
you're
2
wrong.
years. I don't think so. Unfortunately, I am completely and utterly on Bobby's side. If you actually make this legal, you're going to take it out of the hands of criminals. You're going to make it safer. I think that when it's criminalised, that's when you get the problems. But also, you know, there is a financial aspect to this for me. So I've done a little bit of research for you. So it would actually save us 400 million in policing. Do you not think, Dan, that our police forces have got bigger issues to be concerning themselves about than people taking cannabis?
No, because I see what drugs do to people. And marijuana, I am convinced, because I have seen it in my own life, is a gateway drug to harder drugs. And Kathy Gingell, marijuana as well, actually, if you look at people on marijuana, you know, they become less able to contribute to society. And Kathy, this idea that somehow dope is not addictive, again, I just don't believe it, because I see lots of people who had very bright futures who end up sitting at home all day, every day, smoking pot, watching the TV, eating food, and all of a sudden they're not contributing to society at all. So, Kathy, do you agree with me that this needs to become a Class A drug?
I do entirely. I heard so many myths from the other two so far this evening that I'm not quite sure where to begin, except for bravo for Braverman for being the first Home Secretary courageous enough to take on what's been a scourge in our society for years, in which we've abandoned generations of young children to no hope, because as Dan says, kids are affected, their executive functioning's affected, we haven't protected them, and enough youth goes to psychosis. The big studies show the mental health issue is huge. Our mental health wards are full of people who are cannabis addicted. This is it is not a benign drug, and there is very little cannabis around that's low THC nowadays. It's high. An American study says America's full, and by the way, it's a capitalist industry in America. The government doesn't do it. The government is meant to regulate it, but in different states like Colorado, it's in free fall, and the problems have gone up, and the top doctors in America have only published last week reports saying that the spike in psychosis and all those problems is getting higher and higher, and that's with THC 10%. I've talked to Dutch police enforcement people saying you can get THC 16%, and that classifies as a hard drug. We have wrecked poor children, the most disadvantaged children's lives we have failed to protect. And don't tell me there's no relationship between cannabis use, psychosis and stabbings. The evidence all points in that direction.
Bobby, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think, I mean, look, you go in London, if you want a joint, you get a joint in London easier than you can park your car. That's how many people are actually on it. There's loads of people I know that smoke it. They don't get nasty. They're not crackheads. They have a smoke. Everyone I've been with always having a laugh and a joke with it. You mean you just sit indoors and smoking it, and then you've got a problem. You've had something else in it to make you do that. And mental health is just an excuse to get on the pot and not go to work. So I don't agree with that. I think
Rebecca Jane?
that if they'd done it legally, it'll be better. And if they say right for medical reasons as well, that's most important. I mean, a lot of people, seizures, 50 seizures a day, took marijuana, bit in their food, so through the doctors, describing how much to take. Just one in a month.
Rebecca Jane, you want to come in?
If you said to that woman, you can't have that, what do you think she'd say to you? It doesn't work for everyone, but it's still very good for medical purposes. That is the most important thing.
Can I just put in a point here? So we're talking about mental health. I don't know if obviously, is it Kathy? Sorry.
Kathy.
I don't know if you know my. Thank you. I don't know if you know my background, but I actually look after the mental health of 30,000 people up and down the UK. I triage people on a daily basis, and let me tell you now, when I actually see those triage cases and what people come to us for their mental health problems and their reasons, marijuana is virtually never on there. I'll tell you.
It doesn't help, does it, Rebecca?
That's very interesting, because I also researched this area for 1.5 years, actually, for an earlier Conservative Party, and went to nearly every drugs hub around the country, and found that the most denied source of problems with addiction problems was cannabis use, and because it's addictive in itself. And if you just look at the stats from the major psychiatric British survey that's done, it comes very high on the number of cases of people.
Well, Rebecca, surely you wouldn't recommend
mental
it.
Health
but Rebecca, surely you're not going to recommend it to these poor kids who are having mental health problems. What are you going to say? I'll go and smoke some joints and life is going to be better. No, it's going to be worse.
I am not going to wholeheartedly recommend it for children.
I hope
Absolutely not. That's a completely different story.
Goodness.
All I'm telling you is that you can do all of your research and all of your studies and all the rest of it. But this is my day-to-day job. I look after thousands of people. It's not an issue that comes up. You're completely not even talking to me about the point of alcohol. And actually, that's far more damaging than marijuana.
Can I just say something? First of all, thank God, cannabis is not widely used in this country. That's another myth.
Yeah, but legalise it and
it's a minority. Once you legalise it, it pushes the use. Yeah. And then if we had the same use of cannabis as alcohol, we wouldn't recognise society.
No, we wouldn't.
Have it.
We'd all be walking around like zombies. And you know what? This is why I just feel like we don't want to go down this path. We can't ban alcohol now, we understand that, but let's not create more issues in society. Bobby George, final word to you.
Well, like I said, America, if kids, 20-year-olds, they're on the crack coat, up their nose, needle job, they put them in a building, safe building, they can't get out, swimming pools, everything in there, costs $60,000 a year. And how they get them off the heavy drugs, they give them marijuana.
Yeah, but what have they started with, Bobby?
So that is...
Usually marijuana. But look, I appreciate the debate. It was a very good one. That was former professional darts legend Bobby George, the lawyer and broadcaster Rebecca Jane, and the Conservative woman editor Kathy Ginchel. So who do you agree with on this? Is Suella Braverman right to back making cannabis a Class A drug? From Brian on Twitter, if cannabis should be a Class A drug, then alcohol and tobacco should be A+. From John, cannabis dealers should get a mandatory life sentence. I agree on that, actually. And from Matt, madness. I thought this government was about increasing personal freedom, small state, low tax, doubling down on the failed war on drugs. Makes no sense if that is their ideology. What do they stand for? And your verdict is now in. 43% of you agree that Suella Braverman is right to reportedly consider making cannabis a Class A drug, while 57% of you say she isn't. Wow. Bobby's just beaten me. God damn it. Not a good start to the week. Coming up, after activists complain of injuries, is it right to physically remove the likes of Just Stop Oil from the road? Comedian Jim Davidson gets the last laugh on the woke as he tackles outrageous headlines of the day in The Outsider at 9:50. But first, is banning white people from Black History Month events racial discrimination? Nigel Farage asks if the backwards left are responsible for bringing back segregation. He's live straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Now, October marks the annual observance of Black History Month, which could offer an opportunity for education about black culture and unity between different ethnicities, you would think. But thanks to the upsurge in woke ideologies like critical race theory, Black History Month is suddenly becoming a time of segregation. For example, this email sent out by the University of Westminster Student Union made clear that white students are banned from attending certain Black History Month events. The memo reads, while most events are open to all students, a few are reserved for black students to encourage a safe space for discussion and honest conversations. The Student Union failed to justify their actions by declining to comment, but a spokesman for the university said, equality of opportunity does not always mean giving everyone access to the same thing. It means creating a level playing field by offering some programs to those who are underrepresented or those who have had less access to opportunity. Nigel Farage joins me now. Nigel, it is great to have you back. We've missed you the past couple of weeks now. I want to talk to you about Australia in just a moment, actually. But firstly, this story is just so shocking, isn't it? It's like, what, a return to racial segregation in the name of Black History Month? Do you think there's any good reason for what this university is doing?
No, none at all, other than they're being misled by Black Lives Matter and a series of Marxist organisations, and they've lost any sense of moral compass they ever had has gone. Just think about this. Perhaps the most famous speech of the last 60 years is Martin Luther King's, I have a dream. I have a dream that, well, I can't do the accent, but I have a dream that one day my 4 children will be judged not for the colour of their skin, but for the content of their character. And what King was talking about was a society not just of equal opportunity, but one where we were effectively colourblind. We judged people on who they were, what they were, their values, their behaviour. Now what we see from the University of Westminster, but indeed in America, you've now actually got students on the day they get their degrees, the big day, you know, and whether you wear a mortarboard or not, it's not the point, being segregated into black days, white days, Asian days. We're heading down the route of racial segregation. Why is this happening? I'll tell you why. Because the Marxist left, who used to use class as a means of fomenting disputes, of being behind, for example, the Russian Revolution of 1917, they're now using race as a means to divide us. But of course, mainstream media, most of our politicians are far too cowardly to ever call anything like that out. This is divisive, dangerous, frankly, disastrous for society.
I totally agree. And Nigel, the issue is that actually, while you're right, politicians will ignore this because it's too much of a hot potato, ordinary folk just end up looking at something like Black History Month and rather than taking anything positive from it, start feeling turned off about it. And that's such a shame, isn't it? Because it's completely counterproductive.
Well, it is. It is. I mean, I'm just about to launch down White History Month, which I think we should have next year. And let's see what the response is. Let's ask Westminster University whether whites should have priority to attend that event. I mean, the whole thing is just complete and utter nonsense. And we've really, really got to get back to basic principles of equality before the law. A free and fair society treats everybody equally. This is doing the very opposite. And I loathe it, I despise it, and yet I listen. Where are the voices condemning this? Well, Dan Wootton, you're doing it, and I'm joining you in doing it. I've no doubt the great Jim Davison that follows would take a similar view. But too few people are prepared to say anything for fear of nasty words being thrown at them. And that's frankly where we are. And, I almost don't blame the left on this, because we know their agenda. I blame so-called conservatives who've been utterly cowardly on all of these things.
No, very true, very true. And we should all be speaking out against this. Now, Nigel, as I said, you've been off for a fortnight. You're never away, so this was a big deal. We missed you hugely, both on your show and here. But it was fascinating following your journey in Australia, where you have been for the last couple of weeks. And there was this one particular moment, Nigel, where you were challenged by a left-wing protester out there that went viral all around the world. It's had millions of views, but in case you haven't watched it, let me just remind you, and you can react off the bat.
Is that because you haven't got an argument?
Our argument is that fascists aren't welcome here.
I see.
That's our...
People like you who talk about discrimination, who talk about prejudice, actually, you're the ones with the prejudice.
Here to heckle you, we're here to protest the CPAC conference. I'm not here to have a debate with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not here to have a debate. I think you should get out of Sydney. Racist, bigots, anti-queer, fascists are not welcome here. Are not welcome here. Racist, bigots, anti-queer, fascists are not welcome here. Racist, bigots, anti...
But Nigel, what was so fascinating about that exchange? It was so eye-opening. Yes, it was amusing, but the fact is you were there, prepared to talk to the guy and have a debate, and like so much of the extreme left now, no interest whatsoever. He just wanted to hector and harass.
Yes, I mean, Sydney University's finest. They should be so proud of what they're producing. What a fine young man. What a testament to modern university education in the Western world. No, I mean, that was the killer line. When I said, you can't have a debate with me. I don't want to have a debate with you. And that kind of said everything, didn't it, really? Mind closed. He's been fed all sorts of lines that somehow, inside the hall, we were going to be debating removing women's rights. I mean, the whole thing is utterly bonkers. But when you have a university education system that no longer teaches critical thinking, no longer says to young people, challenges young people and says, look, here's a problem. Here are two different ways of dealing with it. You make your mind up, which you think is the correct one, but understand the arguments of the other. And that's how essays used to, an essay used to be marked, not just by your advocacy of one position, but your understanding of what the other argument was. We are no longer doing that. We are brainwashing our kids. And he is now, I'm sorry to say, a classic product of our universities. And you know something, Dan? I will have a civil, maybe heated, but a civil debate with literally anybody. And yet they're just not prepared to engage. And I think that video actually is very, very telling. But also
it spoke to a wide, it's very much spoke to a wider issue, didn't it? Nigel, I just want to ask about the overall situation in Australia politically, though, because it's fascinating. Obviously, the government has recently lurched to the left. Lots of political analysts say we might be about to experience something very similar over here. Is there any buyer's remorse in Australia for going from the Scott Morrison right-wing government to Anthony Albanese as a left-wing Prime Minister?
There's no difference. No difference. Look, the Australian Liberal Party, who, of course, for those watching are the Conservative Party, because down under, everything's the other way around, they completely sold out. I mean, here's a country utterly reliant on the primary production of gas, coal, and all of those commodities. He signed them up to net zero at COP26, but too scared to be the odd man out. The implications of that for Australia are even more serious economically.
Oh, no, we've lost Nigel, but Nigel Farage, thank you so much. And I think we understood the thrust of what he was saying there. Of course, Nigel is back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. But coming up, as Tory ministers prepare to ambush Liz Truss over benefits, does the party need to unite behind the PM or face political death? My superstar panel return to debate that in the Media Buzz at 10. We'll have the first newspaper front pages arriving then too. But first, do the eco-zealots at Just Stop Oil have any right to complain about injuries after members of the public start physically removing them from the road? Comedian Jim Davidson, tonight's outsider, straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper on pages hot off the press coming up. But first, our woke slayer in chief, the legendary comedian Jim Davidson, is tonight's outsider. Now, those middle-class menaces at Just Stop Oil finally appear to have kicked the hornet's nest once too many times. The great British public are taking it upon themselves to physically remove traffic-blocking hippies from the road after they seriously disrupted commuters and emergency service vehicles in recent days. Watch.
Without inconveniencing or imposing their will on others. This is not how it should be. Where's the police? What are we paying our taxes for? Get these people out the road. Get out the road. Get out there. Do your protest there, which don't inconvenience anyone. Right? This is wrong! You're wrong.
Oh my goodness, I love that man. I love that man. Can he come on the show, please? Just Stop Oil complained online about that intervention, though, claiming their protesters needed, quote, emergency medical treatment after being dragged onto the pavement. They insisted the disruption would end when government declares it will stop all future fossil fuel exploration licences. Jim Davidson, what do you make of this? Should members of the public just physically remove these Just Stop Oil maniacs from the road?
Well, you know, you don't want to go assaulting people. Everyone's got the right to protest, but you've got to look at these people. They're stopping working men from going to work, Dan. And these people don't look as if they've ever worked a day in their life. They're all silly little kids, aren't they? And really old, withered white people with nothing better to do because the bingo halls have all shut. You can't blame people from getting out the van and pulling these old crusties off the road and throwing them to one side. I think that we should get free tax and free insurance if we all drove steamrollers. That'd sort them out. Don't you worry about that.
Yes. I mean, Jim, yeah, I have to say, if you're lying in the middle of a road, you're blocking people getting to work, you've got to be expected to be dragged off that road. And I don't believe that's assault, Jim.
Well, I hope it doesn't get any worse, because a lot of the people who drive in vans and lorries going about their business, they realise that these people need medical help. A lot of them are suffering from NBPE, which, as you know, means not being punched enough. And God forbid that is going to happen. Let's have peaceful protest and go and glue yourself somewhere else. Don't block the streets, stop the working man going to work. Crazy.
Now, Jim, we spoke recently about David Beckham, right, who's been outed for his Qatar hypocrisy. But this was crazy. His Man United mate, Gary Neville, also getting in on the act. The former England defender will be working at Qatar's state broadcaster during the World Cup. And this was just weeks after he filmed a documentary highlighting the country's dire human rights record. So I wanted to play you, Jim, what the former Crystal Palace chairman, Simon Jordan, had to say about Neville.
We can land him with the prize tag of the biggest hypocrite that we have recently seen, and that's a long list of people that would fit that particular bill. Gary talks a lot of sense about a lot of things and a lot of nonsense about some other things. And in this instance, of course, he's going to be called a hypocrite.
I have to say, Jim, I'm with Simon Jordan on this.
Well, so am I. And being a Charlton fan, dare I ever agree with a former Crystal Palace owner? But he does have a point. That Gary Neville, I can't see the point of him at all. He should glue himself to a road and just stay there. And stop waving his flag about what's wrong with things and what's wrong with it. And much as I said to you the other week, us as a Western world should, force our will and our way of life on another country. But what's going on out there is wrong when it comes to same-sex partnerships. And Gary Neville's been waving his flag and saying it's all wrong and all this, and now he's taken the Queen's shilling or the dinar or whatever it is over there, and he's made himself look a fool. I always thought he was a fool, actually, and now he's just proved it. It is crazy.
I know. I mean, Jim, you could not get a bigger trio of virtue signalers these days. I feel like you can't switch on the television or watch social media without seeing either Gary Lineker, Gary Neville or David Beckham telling us that we should be supporting some sort of cause, unless it's from a dodgy regime that they want to take millions of pounds from.
Yeah, I know. Well, they didn't start out as being the sharpest knives in the drawers. These people are brilliant footballers. They can bend the ball round the wall. And now they can bend their moral compass as well. Well, I hope they enjoy the Queen's shilling, or in this case, the Sheikh's shilling.
Well, yeah, but just stay out of politics, right? That's the point. Stay out of politics. Because, by the way, I wouldn't be criticising Gary Neville and David Beckham at all if they weren't preaching to us all the time. I don't care. Take the money if that's what you want to do. I understand this was a FIFA decision, but it's the fact that they are constantly trying to put themselves on some sort of moral pedestal and think that they're better than the likes of you or me, Jim.
That's it. Let's pour some milk on them. That'll sort it out. Let's send the protesters round and say, look, you can't go to Qatar or we're going to glue you to the road and pour milk on you. Don't you worry about that.
Now, Jim, you know I am a big fan of Madonna, Jim, and she has been snogging women for years, including, by the way, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, famously. But 64-year-old Madonna, the queen of pop, has she just come out as gay? So, Jim, apparently this is some sort of trend. Have you heard of this thing, Jim, TikTok? TikTok, it's some sort of Chinese social media site. So some people are saying we should take her coming out with a pinch of salt. Jim, you know I'm a big Madonna fan, so I'm a bit scared about what you're going to say. But is she actually just becoming a bit of an attention seeker here, Jim?
I think she is, and she's not going to get very far in the gay world with a pair of old pink drawers like that. I tell you, they look like apple catchers, don't they? And I think the thing is with Madonna, you can tell. I mean, she acts young, but she close up, she needs ironing, Dan. I'm sorry to say it, and I know she's a sort of a Dan icon, but she's probably run out of blokes now. She's run out of blokes to play with, so she thinks, I'll have a couple of birds, that'll do me. Apparently, her boyfriend is 23 years of age. I wonder what it feels like to him to have old age creeping up on him.
Oh, Jim. And look, I had to ask you about...
now, and
well, look,
I struggle a little bit with sometimes Madonna being a little bit attention-seeking online, but I refuse to criticise the woman, Jim. I refuse to criticise her because, to me, she is an all-time icon. You know, we don't have many of them left, do we? You know, you look at all of the greats that have gone or had their dodgy personal lives ruin their reputations, you know, be it Michael Jackson or whoever. So it's nice, I think, that we still have someone who we all know around the world, but maybe she should...
We've still got icons. We've still got icons. There's Christopher Biggins. You know, I bet he's got the same pink drawers as Madonna as well. You know?
It's very true, and he is an icon.
I love him.
Now, Jim, I hadn't spoken to you about this earlier, but Nigel Farage wanted to get your take. Did you hear him talking about the fact that Black History Month events at Westminster University have now banned white people from attending at all? And Nigel seems to think that you're going to be on the same page as him about this one, thinking that this is very divisive. Is that where you're at, Jim?
Well, I tend to have my own page, and I think not just divisive, but it gets to fuel the bigots. You know, I see it in my audiences, and I see it in other people's audiences. I see it when I mingle with people. All this stuff does, it draws people apart. It doesn't bring people together, and that's the whole idea. You know, the guy was wearing the White Lives Matter shirt, and that caused outrage. All lives matter. We're all the same. We have, listen. Our country, I look at it as a great cake, and a great cake has great ingredients that mix together. Let's start doing that. Let's stop these silly students. Just go and glue yourself to the road and let racial tension work its way out. We'll all get by.
Yeah,
crazy. It's all young students and mad people. It's gone mental. The world's gone mental.
Yeah, and a lot of them, sadly, Jim, seem to work at the BBC these days as well. But there you go.
They certainly do. Thank God I got the sack.
Jim Davidson, you're not going to get the sack from here. We will speak very soon. Jim Davidson, a pleasure as always. Thank you, Jim. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Cabinet Office Minister Nadhim Zahawi begs Tories to back Liz Truss or risk a coalition of Starmer and the dangerously divisive Nicola Sturgeon.
Behind Liz, because division will cause delay. Delay is our enemy, and ultimately defeat to Keir Starmer.
Is it a case of unite or die for the Conservative Party? I'll debate that next with my superstar panel tonight. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and political commentator and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Plus, has the once close relationship between Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng turned toxic? The Chancellor's friend of 25 years, top Daily Mail columnist Stephen Glover, breaks down whether they're fated to become the new Blair and Brown. He's uncancelled at 10:45. As it's claimed, the new series of The Crown will depict Prince Philip having an affair when it drops, just a month after Elizabeth II's death. Are the Be Kind Sussexes the ultimate hypocrites for standing by Netflix? And speaking of royal theatrics, with the likes of biographer Tom Bower fair to questions Meghan's sincerity at the Queen's funeral, given this admission.
Now make yourself cry. Oh, I can do that so well. Oh my God, it's crazy. You're like, Meghan, one tear, left eye, go.
The man himself, Meghan's biographer Tom Bower, joins me live to break down more Montecito madness at 10:20. As leading universities attempt to decolonise courses as harmless as chemistry and thermodynamics, are our institutions teaching the next generation how to be chronically offended? Plus, a true national treasure, the comedy icon behind Fawlty Towers and Monty Python, John Cleese, he's heading to GB News.
To say it's a right-wing channel, it's a free speech channel.
I'm excited about that. I'm sure you are too. But why are the rabid left trying to silence one of our best-loved stars by demanding don't mention the culture war? I'll bring you more details on all of those stories, plus the newspaper front pages and the media buzz at 10:30 tonight. And on the subject of Greatest Britain's, don't miss the first GBUJ of the week, so stay up with us tonight. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, says Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities are a sign of Vladimir Putin's desperation following a series of setbacks by his military forces. It comes after officials said at least 12 people have been killed and more than 80 injured as the Kremlin launched its biggest airstrike since the start of the war. President Biden has also condemned the attacks, saying it highlights the brutality of Putin's war. President Zelensky says work is already underway to rebuild.
Now, across the whole country, restoration works are ongoing. We will restore all objects which were damaged by today's strike of Russian terrorists. It is only a question of time. I set a task for all structures of our state to work so that the restoration would be as fast as possible.
Meanwhile, President Putin says he was right to retaliate after an explosion badly damaged a Russian bridge and military supply line to the illegally occupied Crimea. Putin accused Ukraine of a terrorist attack on the bridge and threatened further retaliatory strikes if they don't stop. Here, Scotland's First Minister says she's going to hold an independence referendum on the 19th of October next year if the UK Supreme Court approves it. Closing the SNP conference in Aberdeen earlier on today, Nicola Sturgeon said leaving the UK would lead to better relationships with England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Ms Sturgeon also said Scotland would rejoin the European Union. The Supreme Court will hear legal arguments this week before deciding if Holyrood has the required powers to legislate for a second vote. And the Chancellor has bowed to pressure today to bring forward his much-anticipated medium-term fiscal plan. Last week, in an exclusive interview with GB News, Kwasi Kwarteng said he was going to stick to the original date of mid-November. But today, in a letter to the chairman of the Commons Treasury Committee, he said he'll now publish it on October the 31st. And just lastly, police investigating a triple stabbing which took place in Bishopsgate in central London last Thursday have now arrested a 25-year-old man. Witnesses reported seeing a phone robbery in which 2 or 3 masked men attacked a pedestrian with a knife. Members of the public tried to intervene and 3 people ended up with injuries. The suspect was arrested this morning in North London. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB Plus radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Time now for part 2 of Dan Wootton Tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. The first front pages are in, and the Metro leads on alleged, quote, baby poisoner nurse Lucy Letby. A court heard how the 32-year-old is linked to the death of 7 babies on a neonatal ward. According to the prosecution, they were injected with insulin, air or milk. Letby, described as, quote, the one common denominator discovered by consultants and police, denies those murders and 15 attempted murders of infants at the Countess of Chester Hospital in Cheshire. The Eye leads with Liz Truss facing a showdown with rebels as she holds crunch meetings to try and dampen a new wave of rebellion. One senior Tory claims the budget fiasco, quote, gave people permission to desert, adding Starmer may be boring, but he's not mad. Tory snake Michael Gove is also prepared to continue speaking out, according to the publication. Actually, we're going to go into depth in this in just one moment. So let me bring my superstar panel back in now to do that. The top Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, star reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and former MEP and political campaigner Belinda de Lucy. So as we just saw there, rebel Tory ministers preparing another ambush on Liz Truss tomorrow, this time demanding she raise benefit payments in line with inflation. The PM depressingly expected to cave into her cabinet's demands when they meet in Number 10 tomorrow and rule out her initial plan of raising benefits in line with wages to help rein in spending. A Downing Street source said Truss has realised the policy wouldn't get through the parliamentary party, and another sign that her government has been paralysed by incessant infighting. Truss had reportedly warned Tory MPs to stop undermining her, and Cabinet Office Minister Nadeem Zahawi yesterday called for the party to unite to avoid a Hallish-Starmer-Sturgeon coalition.
Behind Liz, because division will cause delay. Delays our enemy and ultimately defeat to Keir Starmer. We don't want to see Keir Starmer with Nicola Sturgeon, who now talks about detesting the Conservatives. I think that language is really dangerous. I prefer to work with my colleagues in Scotland.
Former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries also warned the government faced electoral oblivion if MPs didn't get behind Truss.
A general election tomorrow, that would probably mean complete wipeout for the Conservative Party. We can't have a leadership election, put a new leader in place and immediately to start discussing about how we remove that leader. They need to stop, they need to get behind her and they need to support her.
So it's now a case of unite behind Truss or die for the Conservative Party. Carol Malone, I think it's getting to that point.
I don't understand why the rebels don't see what they're doing. I mean, this is electoral suicide. They're cannibalising their own party. You know, Gove is an experienced enough minister, not currently, it has to be said, who knows exactly what he's doing, as is Grant Shapps, and both of them are leading the charge against Truss. It just, you know, do they really want the Tories with Sturgeon leading this country? Because if Starmer gets in, it's going to be run by Labour and Rayner, by militant unionists and by the woke brigade. Do people really want that in this country? Starmer has no idea about growth. He has no plan for growth, never has had. And yet here we have a plan that almost every analyst in this country and overseas at the US says will work in terms of growth and productivity, and yet we have people inside the party saying it doesn't. And as for this thing tomorrow where they're going to have a go at it over benefits, Truss's argument was, and I think there are millions in this country, people in this country will agree with her, what she is basically saying is you can't have people on benefits having a bigger inflation uplift than people who actually work.
I know.
Now, and I know there's a lot of people in this country who are on benefits and who do work, but we can't pretend that there's a great underbelly in this country, people who are claiming benefits and they choose not to work. Why should those people
and their uplift,
get
by the way, is just going to be in line with the rest of us.
Yes, but there are people who are working.
So it is still an increase.
There are people who are working 7 days a week who are not going to get a pay rise in line with inflation. And I think there would be few. I did a TV show the other day and a woman rang in and she was on benefits and she said, I only get £1,800 a month. And I was thinking, my God, there are people going to be listening to you thinking, I work 5, 6, 7 days a week.
And what's the point of working?
And I don't get that.
And that's why we have so many jobs available at the moment. Benjamin Butterworth, you must just be sitting back and rubbing your hands with glee and salivating. Look, you know, I blame a lot of your folk in the media for creating this situation in the first place, especially when it came to Boris Johnson. Well, actually, it did used to be their fault, Carol, but actually now I feel like the Conservative Party have picked up the baton and they've run with it.
Completely.
I mean, I always find it hilarious how someone who used to duty edit the best-selling newspaper in the country blames other people as being the media. You're the media. But you know what, on the point of Liz Truss, I find the question that you posed quite odd because you said, do they unite or die? Well, they are dying under Liz Truss, so that's really not the situation they find themselves in. You know, Liz Truss is the least popular Prime Minister there's ever been. She's the least popular major party leader there has ever been.
They didn't give her a chance.
Well, I mean, she did get a chance. She had the mini budget, and then we saw the most extraordinary action from the markets. And she is more unpopular, not just than Boris Johnson was at his lowest point. She's more unpopular than Jeremy Corbyn ever was during his failed
That is simply not true. That is simply not true.
Where's your proof? Because I heard it on GB News earlier today.
It's definitely true. It's definitely true in that case.
The thing is, when you have, they wanted, the Tory party wanted a new leader. They chose the new leader. We didn't want it. The electorate didn't want it.
The members didn't want it. Truss didn't want it.
It was foisted on
finally
us.
said something that makes sense. The electorate didn't want Liz Truss.
No, they didn't want an election. Never mind. They
do want an election.
They didn't want a leadership election. They wanted us to carry on.
It was the MPs who wanted to get rid of Boris, Belinda DeLucy. Yes. This is the madness of this situation. Then they didn't get their little globalist puppet, Rishi Sunak, and so they'd rather drive the party to the ground, destroy Liz Truss's reputation, destroy Kwasi Kwarteng's reputation, and it makes me physically ill. They need to all take a good, hard look in the mirror and actually do what's best for the Conservative Party, because let me tell you, what's right for the Conservative Party at the moment is right for the country.
The Conservative Parliamentary Party are the Tories' own worst
enemy. If we end up with a Labour SNP coalition, I won't blame the voters. I won't even blame Labour or SNP. I will blame the Conservative Parliamentary Party. They were
because
given
you can't blame the members either, Belinda.
No, the
you
members.
can't blame the members.
But think about it. Since 2016, Tory infighting gave us a torturous Brexit, almost overturned democracy. They ousted a Prime Minister chosen by the country. They're trying to oust a Prime Minister chosen by the members because the centrist blob in the Tory party that are so obsessed with moving back to pleasing everyone Lib Dem style are winning. They are the ones that are going to bring in a Labour government. I will blame them
But they
if
are
it happens.
backed by the mainstream media too.
They are.
And Benjamin might say it doesn't make a difference. But
Well,
I'm
it's
sorry,
just
Benjamin,
bizarre
do not
that-
tell me when Starmer... and by the way, I say that purposefully. Do not tell me when Starmer becomes Prime Minister that they are going to give him 10 days before driving him into the ground. He
Well, I
will
tell
be
you what.
treated like a hero, and Truss deserved a honeymoon period for the good of this country. And what your lot have tried to do is drag her down from day dot.
I tell you what, if on Keir Starmer's 10th working day as Prime Minister, he's managed to crash the economy, put the pound at its lowest on record, and get the International Monetary Fund involved, and cost the Bank of England £65 billion.
How
Well, then I
terrible
tell
that
you
a
what,
Prime
I
Minister
tell you what,
does exactly what they've just outlined they're going to do for the past 3 months and been voted in democratically to the office to do. How terrible.
Calm down. I tell you what, if that happens under Keir Starmer after 10 days in office, then I'll call for him to leave, OK? Because that is an unbelievably hopeless way to govern this country. And the truth is, what you don't accept, you seem to think that the public, that the electorate in this country can't think for themselves. They can, and they've seen that Liz Truss is a hopeless Prime Minister.
How have they done? How can you tell that within a month? You know what
Because
we have.
they can't afford their own mortgages.
Within a month, you've written her off.
What we have
Within
at
a
the heart
month, you've
of the
written her
Tory
off.
She wrote herself off, sweetie.
She did not. We have a group of agitators at the heart of the Tory body who are standing in the way of growth and productivity, and they're doing it for purely personal reasons.
Well, that's the Tories' fault. Why would you vote for them then?
Gove has stabbed the last 4 Prime Ministers in the back. He did it to Cameron, he did it to Theresa May, he did it to Boris twice, and now he's doing it to Truss. And why? Because all of those people either didn't give him a job or they took a job away from him.
That's
This is
because
pure
the Tories,
and utter bitterness on
the
his
Tories
part.
are a circus of the entitled who've completely lost touch with
Gove,
the point of running this country
is
and
the
of what
person
people
leading.
want. And
Gove is leading this for purely personal reasons, and he doesn't give a stuff about what happens to the country or to the British people. He just wants to get
guess what? He's all of a sudden got a whole load of allies at the BBC and Sky News and ITV News, doesn't he? Now, finally, we know Just Stop Oil have been causing yet more trouble across the capital in recent days. So we sent our producer, Ben Leo, down to Buckingham Palace this morning to see if their climate hysteria really stacks up.
Hello, guys. Good morning. You don't want to speak?
Come on, you can speak to me.
Oh. Hello, how are you doing? What does your boss think about you being here today? Why was there a warming period in the Roman times over a couple of hundred years? It was exceptionally warm and then it got cold. Can you explain that? There wasn't any industrial revolution then.
Why are we talking about minor periods of warming?
What do you think about the international declaration signed by 1,100 climate scientists who said that there is no climate emergency?
They were not climate scientists.
I don't know what you're talking about. Is their science the wrong kind of science?
It's not. Yeah, they.
But how much data is the recent studies based on? A couple hundred years? Do you know how many years worth of data your modelling is based off?
I'm not a climate scientist, so...
Right, but you should know how many years worth of data the modelling is based off.
I am an environmental scientist myself.
Can you tell me how many years your data is based over?
It's based... What are you talking about?
Do you know what % of global emissions the UK is responsible for?
Do you? I don't actually know the current number.
Do you know what % of global emissions the UK is responsible for?
But we're a world leader. Do you know what percentage the UK is responsible for?
Now, hang on a minute.
Sorry.
Answer that question first. And
Yeah,
I'll
it's
try.
small, but we're a world leader on that stage. We have to lead the way.
That lady there is also an environmental scientist.
Exactly, and that's why it's even more shocking. She doesn't know how many years of data that your modelling is based off.
That lady
Do you know that?
has also been travelling from Scotland.
Oh, she's tired.
Overnight.
She's tired.
Has not slept more than 3 hours.
As Carol Malone just said watching that, Ben Leo just monstered them. Now, by the way, 25 of those Scottish protesters were swiftly arrested by the Met. The group has promised more protests for the rest of the week. Can I say just drag them off the road if you see them? Am I allowed to?
Yeah, I was looking at
Gently
punters,
drag them
punters
off the
today
road.
dragging them off the road. Something's going to give, you know, because the public are getting really
If my
fed up
child
with
was out there with her hands glued to the road, I would totally understand if someone pushed her out the way, and she would deserve it.
Indeed. Belinda Lucy with Caroline. Stand by, because coming up, as universities try to decolonise courses including chemistry and thermodynamics, our institutions teaching young people how to just be constantly offended. We're going to debate that when the Media Buzz returns at 10:30. We'll have more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages too. But first, as it's claimed, the new series of The Crown will depict Prince Philip cheating on the late Queen. Are the Be Kind Sussexes the ultimate hypocrites for standing by their employers? Netflix and does a resurface video of Meghan bragging about her ability to cry on cue vindicate the likes of her biographer Tom Bower, who went viral for critiquing her appearance at the Queen's funeral. Tom Bower with me live straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. After missing the ceremony because of the Queen's death earlier today, Prince Harry met with this year's Well Child Award winners online while speaking about his, quote, emotional support dogs and sounding suspiciously American. Look.
You're not 5 yet. When's your birthday?
16th of November.
Almost 15th of November. 15th of November. Wow. So it's literally just over a month away. Are you excited? I tell you what, we all need a dog that keeps us calm. I've got 3 in this house now, so we basically have 5 children. They are also emotional support dogs, 100%.
Well, the royal family could certainly do with some of that emotional support from Harry, especially following this front page from The Sun today, which revealed that Netflix is poised to show Prince Philip pursuing an affair with high society pal Penny Natchbull in the new series of The Crown, released next month. Now, royal experts are understandably incensed by the Netflix smear campaign, including the Queen's former press secretary, Dickie Arbiter, who called it, quite frankly, cruel rubbish. But where's the outrage now from their very rich employees, Harry and Meghan, who teamed up with the streaming giant for an eye-watering £73 million to release a reality show? Well, Meghan's biographer, Tom Bower, joins me now. So, Tom, do you think Harry and Meghan are fast learning what they signed away when they took this Netflix big moolah? And I would say they signed away their credibility and their dignity.
Well, that's our view, but it's not theirs. They need the money, and they need it now more than ever because they've got no other source of income. So I think they're just stuck with the devil now. They're tied to Netflix, they're tied to their book, and all the criticism they're going to take means nothing because that's the only way they can earn their money.
Very interesting, actually. I don't know if you saw this from Tina Brown, who was, of course, one of the last people to see Diana before her death. She said the Duke and the Duchess are poor by Hollywood standards. This was at the Henley Literary Festival, and she branded the couple D-list celebrities and said in Montecito their $14 million mansion is a humble cottage compared to what these other people have. And she added, at some point, it might be more than a new house she's looking for. Elon Musk is still single. That's all I have to say. So do you agree with Tina Brown that there is a huge financial motivation behind what Meghan does? Obviously, you've written this book, Revenge, about her so recently, of course.
Well, of course, that has always been her motive. She's money obsessed and always has been. And that is why she married Prince Harry. A great surprise and disappointment was to discover that Prince Harry had very little money. She imagined he'd be worth hundreds of millions, if not billions. And she's having to make up for it now. And that's why I think, I think Tina is a great journalist, and perhaps she has inside information. I don't see how the Sussexes can give up both the Netflix and the book deal. They won't be living in a Montecito cottage. They'll be more likely living somewhere in downtown LA, in a little hovel. That's their problem. They're stuck now. But, you know, the truth is about them that the only way I can conceive of Harry getting out of it now is if Charles would bail him out. Somehow he'd have to pay off Netflix, he'd have to pay off Random House's publishers. It would cost millions of dollars or pounds. But Harry might give that to him in return for a signed agreement never to knock the royal family again. That's the only thing I can imagine would actually end this confrontation. But I can't see Meghan signing that deal. Meghan has got no interest whatsoever in giving way, being silent. She wants the battle. She wants to rubbish the royal family and go on to bigger things. So I think that this battle is going to go on. Hostilities have resumed, I think.
And that's the problem, isn't it, Tom? You know, they have signed this deal with the Hollywood devil, in this case, Netflix, and Netflix is now demanding its pound of flesh. They're not happy with this woke children's TV series that Meghan wanted to do and some sort of twee documentary that Harry was planning about the Invictus Games. They want the dirt on the royal family, don't they, Tom?
Well, I think they've got the dirt. I mean, they've been filming now for more than a year. And I'm sure that everything that Harry spewed out to the ghostwriter for the book, he gave Netflix to, plus a lot more. And so they've got it in the can, so to speak. The only question now is whether they're prepared to dump it. I don't see why they should. I mean, this is their investment, and it'll come brilliantly at the end of The Crown. Netflix is in battle with all the other streaming services. They want to now push their own product. They don't care, rightly so, if the Sussexes suddenly decide that they're cowards. And I don't think Meghan wants to pull out. I think that is a source of friction, if it's happening, between the two, Harry and Meghan. And Netflix aren't going to give way. Why on earth should they? They make fools of themselves. They've got a great series, I should think, by now.
But Tom, can't we finally now just accept that Harry is the ultimate Hollywood hypocrite? Because you know what he's like about any other media organisation that writes the tiniest thing against him or Meghan or his mother, his late mother, that he's not happy about. Well, I'm sorry, Netflix are actually focusing the entire next series of The Crown on the breakdown in the marriage between Diana and Charles. There's actually an entire episode which recreates part of the Panorama interview between Diana and Martin Bashir that Prince William has worked so hard to get the BBC to consign to history. Yet Harry is prepared to take money from this organisation. So can't we just ignore Harry anytime he moans about the media now? Because it's meaningless, surely.
Well, you're absolutely right, Dan, but do remember that extraordinary interview he did on top of a bus driving around LA with Corbyn. And he actually said that the Netflix series has got some things right. He actually damned his own family by endorsing the Netflix Crown. And as I said in my book, he watched the Netflix series in the home of a multi-billionaire and kept on saying, well, they've got that right, that bit's wrong, but that bit's right. So he is completely disloyal. He's burnt his bridges as far as that's concerned. And you know, in the end, my book is pretty critical of them both. I haven't heard a peep from them yet.
No, true. And I guess, though, £73 million maybe does buy a degree of silence, or as you say, even support. But Tom, look, I wanted to speak about the last time you were here because you went viral around the world for this critique of the Duchess of Sussex.
Emotional back then? I mean, when she allegedly touched a tear, or was it an act of a Hollywood actress thinking I better do a gesture to suggest a tear? The only person that Meghan, I think at the moment, is crying for is for herself. Certainly not for the Queen.
Tom, that was obviously in reference to the fact that she had seemingly shed a tear at the Queen's funeral. But I just wonder if you feel vindicated for those comments now, after this video has now been unearthed.
Now make yourself cry. Oh, I can do that so well. Oh my God, it's crazy. You're like, Meghan, one tear, left eye, go.
And there it is, Tom. The tear was coming from her left eye.
Well, great researchers you've got, Dan. I mean, the point about Meghan is she's a wonderful delisted actress. She knows exactly when to turn it on. And I didn't believe a word, a gesture she made there. And her smile and her somber looks, it was all for the cameras. She's gone back to Montecito, prepared for war. And it's going to be a very bloody autumn, winter, and spring too, as far as she's concerned. She needs the money. She needs the fame. She's looking to the future, and the people in the past, they're always, in the Meghan's world, damned and buried. That's the way she works.
No, very true. And of course, we're going to keep on this with you. The acclaimed royal biographer Tom Bower, of course, the author of Revenge, a fascinating book about Meghan Markle. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
But coming up, is the close relationship between Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng under strain? The Chancellor's friend of 25 years, top Daily Mail columnist Stephen Glover gives his take in Uncancelled at 10:45. But next, as woke universities become obsessed with decolonising even their most innocent courses, are they teaching young people how to be offended? My Superstar panel return for that and more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages straight after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness, man.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages, and now let's get straight to them. The Daily Star tells us to forget working from home or WFH because we are now WFP, aka working from the pub. Pubs are flogging work packages to punters struggling with energy costs at home, and makes sense, doesn't it? The Daily Mirror leads with an alleged, quote, poisoner on the ward as it covers the trial of Lucy Letby, the neonatal nurse accused of murdering 7 babies at a Cheshire hospital by allegedly injecting them with insulin, air or milk. She denies the charges. The Daily Express also leads on that case, where Lucy was described by prosecutors as, quote, the constant malevolent presence when things took a turn for the worse. Her trial continues. The Sun, too, leads on this story. Plus, there's a cruel attack on my friend, Strictly Come Dancing head judge Shirley Ballas. Trolls have accused her of sexism after she went against the rest of the panel and supported Radio 2's Richie Anderson over singer Fleur East on this week's show. How rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Shirley Ballas is the least sexist person I know, and she is the best judge on that show, and I believe every vote that she casts. The Daily Mail leads with the day death rained from the sky as Putin ramps up attacks on Kiev and other Ukrainian cities following an explosion on a bridge connecting Russia to the annexed Crimea this weekend. New strikes have left at least 11 dead. And The Guardian leads with Zelensky pleading for more help to combat Russian attacks. My superstar panel return now for more in the Media Buzz. Top Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, star reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Now, the front page of the Daily Mail today led with a bombshell new investigation about how bizarre wokery is being steamrolled into the university curriculum. According to the paper, unis have been appeasing left-wing activists to such an extent that courses like business, chemistry and even thermodynamics are demonstrating their efforts to, quote, decolonise the curriculum. Among the Mail's findings, the audit reveals that the decolonising trend is a response to Black Lives Matter and that debating societies have introduced tougher vetting for controversial speakers. Skills Minister Andrea Jenkins said in response, universities should be focused on delivering high-quality face-to-face teaching which offers students value for money and sets them up for future success, not wasting time on initiatives that distract from these ambitions. So, are young people now paying universities simply to learn how to get offended, Belinda de Lucy?
Yeah, well, I'm so thrilled that my eldest has chosen an apprenticeship over university.
Good on
so
them.
Thrilled, and it's through her choice. But universities have become an unsafe place for young people and their critical thinking, their social development, their tolerance levels. I do believe they're breeding grounds for hatred, for extremism, for an inability to take challenges, to need sort of safe spaces when your ideology is being questioned. People can't take questioning anymore. They're producing these fragile, terrified generation who just want to make decisions from a comfort zone and never take any risks and never be around company they don't like, just this constant echo chamber. And I know because I was at university 3 years ago doing a Masters in EU law, and I experienced the change in class between now and when I did a degree in the 1990s. It is huge. Yeah. Free speech is totally stifled, and we're creating a generation of zombies. People.
I mean, Benjamin Butterworth, you might remember on our first ever show, you know, I described you as the wokest man in Britain.
Well,
and is that because you are a product of this terrible snowflakey university system, Benjamin?
I mean, look, don't call me the wokest man in Britain because I don't want you to assume my gender.
Oh, God.
You've definitely been...
God help me.
The wokest they.
The wokest they in Britain.
You know, I find this... I mean, look, you know, it's a little bit longer than 3 years ago that I was doing my undergraduate at the LSE, which is sort of known as a left-wing university.
Yeah, I was going to say, woke as hell.
It's not really... And I just have to say that, you know, there were student societies where they might choose what type of speakers you have in the way that this Daily Mail article suggested, but actually the academic side of university is incredibly straightforward, and I think the truth is that the reason this is trying to be whipped up is to distract from the disaster that is Liz Truss, rather than some woke attitude in university.
This was a great investigation by the Daily Mail, and it was proper journalism.
There was no substance in
but
it.
We can't stop all journalism because you just want to keep reporting on Liz Truss. This was a great investigation.
But there was no substance in it. You know, I kept looking for...
There was so much substance.
Yes, and they're trying to decolonise... I read one ridiculous thing today. One lecturer at Newcastle University said they were trying to decolonise her subject, which was dentistry. I don't quite know how you manage that. And then the head of mechanical engineering at Sheffield...
Benjamin, even you know
he sought advice from BLM. Why the hell would you do that when you're teaching mechanical engineering?
Benjamin, how do you decolonise something? Seriously,
how do you
what does it
decolonise
mean?
dentistry?
I mean, I spent most of the day trying to work out what thermodynamics is, which is one of the things that has been decolonised. Well, I still
But
can't
how
tell
do you decolonise dentistry? Tell me how that happens.
Well, I mean, look, I'm not a dentist, right? But what I would say...
Well, you don't have to be a dentist, but why was dentistry
I
affected
don't
by...
believe in this decolonisation thing. When I see this word, I want to say it in quote marks, you know, because I think it's decolonisation. I don't believe in it. I think what that means is trying to deny and erase our history, which has great things and
our culture, and to be ashamed of our culture.
The teaching is that every white person is a racist, and every white person who disagrees with that is denying their racism.
And Carol, I have evidence of this. I had to write to the headmistress of one of my schools because my daughter was being taught in class that only white people can be racist, and ever since then, all the different groups of girls are now segregated, self-segregating themselves by race because they're taught that white people are inherently bad from birth. This cannot go on.
You know, Martin Luther King,
it's dangerous.
He used to talk about dreaming of a world, of a future where people were judged by their character, not by the colour of their skin. In universities now, they're teaching the critical race theory, which means that racism must be uppermost in your minds at all times. The complete opposite of what Martin Luther King was calling for.
Well, it's the complete opposite of what I grew up with. Because I grew up in a colourblind world, and I will stick to that.
No, you
don't
didn't.
care, Benjamin.
Oh, he did. Of course you didn't. My world wasn't a colourblind world, but your world is.
Well, do you know what?
I grew up in a colourblind world in the 1980s, and I grew up to believe that it didn't matter. It didn't matter what colour my friends were, because we were all equal. And I'm sorry, I cling to that, and I stick by that, and I will never go down this anti-racist path, because all I want to be is not racist.
Well, I tell you,
I need to be anti-racist.
I
don't need to decolonise anything because it's our history.
I'd bet good money that, you know, the black or the Asian people that you grew up with would not say that they grew up in a colourblind world, because they will notice the kind of racism that exists, the kind of subtle prejudices that they face in their day-to-day lives.
So then they'll also notice
if you're
that you can't
colourblind,
hate
then you're
racism
blind to
with
racism.
Do you think racism goes only one way? Do you think it's only people of colour that can be subjects of racism from white people?
Well,
because it works both ways.
In a society like ours, racism is structural, and it is institutional, and it is predominantly against
report.
It is predominantly
Did you read this report by Tony Sewell? It's completely
I do
false
recall
what
that
you're
report,
saying.
yes.
Well, Tony Sewell found that there was no structural or institutional racism in the UK.
and the overwhelming majority of black academics and investigators do not agree with him.
People tried to destroy him for his research, for his data, for his opinion. But, you know, the thing is, this kind of... What they're doing in university now fosters division. It fosters racism.
It doesn't. It forces white people to think about the responsibility they have and the effects of things like colonisation.
I will continue to live in my colourblind world. I will continue to not care.
Yeah, well, the black people of this country don't have that luxury, Dan.
Whoever I am with, and that is how
Stop victimising black people, as well as if you speak for all black people. A lot of black people don't feel like they're born victims.
They don't. Yeah, exactly right, they do.
Well, why don't you get a black person on to discuss this?
We used to have Esther Cracker on here who said, don't call me a victim of white culture, because I'm not. She said, don't call me a victim in any way,
Tony
shape or
Sewell,
form.
we have had on this show as well. But final word, Benjamin.
Well, I think you would struggle to find a single person who is particular black who would say that they haven't experienced racism in this country,
It doesn't make
regardless
the
of
country
how they vote.
systematically racist.
No, of course, because just like you and I, I'm sure, experience homophobia. It doesn't mean we are a structurally homophobic country. There is a big difference between saying there are examples of racism and that we are structurally racism. And in fact, we had Calvin Robinson debating with Albion Ancona on this very point on the show last week. Now, at this stage, the BBC is essentially the ministry of silly wokies. So it's no surprise one of its top-tier stars is now walking away for good. National treasure and great British comedy legend John Cleese, once a staple of the corporation with iconic comedies like Monty Python's Flying Circus and Fawlty Towers, announced he will now be boycotting the virtue signalling bead for fear of being cancelled, as he announced today he will be joining GB News in the new year. Yet more proof that this maverick channel is the future of TV, while the pandering and pathetic BBC is in danger of becoming a dead corporation, bereft of life, an ex-broadcaster. Here's how he revealed the news.
I met one or two of the people concerned and had a dinner with them, and I liked them very much. And what they said was, people say it's a right-wing channel, it's a free speech channel. I mean, the BBC have not come to me and said, would you like to have some one-hour shows? And if they did, I would say, not on your Nelly, because I wouldn't get 5 minutes into the first show before I'd been cancelled or censored.
He's right, you know. I'm sure you're as excited about this news as us, but of course, that wasn't the case with the rabid lefty liberals of Twitter. The Be Kind left once again showed their trademark intolerance after the announcement as users who couldn't convince more than a handful of people to hit follow tried to silence this national treasure with a career spanning more than 6 years simply for not agreeing with them. Don't mention the culture war, you might say. That's not how we do things here at Britain's home of free speech. So welcome to the family, John Cleese. Belinda Lucy, Benjamin with Caroline. You guys do stand by, because coming up, can you guess which rapper has been nominated for Union Jackass by one of my panel? Sit tight for the first GBUJ of the week. It's imminent. But first, has the close relationship between Truss and Kwarteng turned toxic? And if so, who's to blame? The Chancellor's friend of 25 years, top Daily Mail columnist Stephen Glover, will tell us his thoughts in mere seconds. But first, a preview of tomorrow's show from Mark Dolan, who'll be sitting in for me over the next few days. Take it away, Mark.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight with me, Mark Dolan. Have the commentators got Trussonomics all wrong? Ex-Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce and co-chair of Leave Means Leave, John Longworth, explains why the political, media and financial establishment should get behind the PM's economic reforms. Plus, there's opinion galore from trigonometry host Konstantin Kissin, a State of Fear author Laura Dodsworth, and my superstar panel, media personality Christine Hamilton, Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Kwasi Kwarteng will announce his debt-cutting fiscal plan to balance Britain's books 3 weeks early on October the 31st in an attempt to reassure the markets. But in a sign of the growing tension between Liz Truss and her Chancellor, emerged today that the PM vetoed Kwarteng's choice for the Treasury's Permanent Secretary, appointing James Bowler ahead of Antonio Romeo. And according to the Sunday Times, Kwarteng could be turning on Truss already, with reports the Chancellor told a prominent Tory last Monday that Truss's chances of survival are only 40 to 60%. Now, if this is true, then it's truly shocking how quickly their once strong partnership has broken down and begun to resemble the toxic relationship between Tony Blair and his then-Chancellor, Gordon Brown. Now, Stephen Glover believes both Truss and Kwarteng have both been politically naive, but hopes they stick with their radical economic plan. As he writes in his latest Daily Mail column, the truth is that if he had been more politically adroit, he could have spared himself, the government, and most important of all, the country, a great deal of unnecessary pain. The chief culprit is Kwasi Kwarteng, though his admirer and friend Liz Truss is far from being without blame for allowing this wholly unnecessary nightmare to unravel. And I'm pleased to say Stephen Glover joins me now. I mean, Stephen, this is crazy, isn't it? Because we were told during the leadership campaign that Truss and Kwarteng were thick as thieves. You know, they were great friends. They went to each other's homes. This was going to be a really close relationship between Chancellor and PM. And it feels like it's toxic already. Is there any way for them to turn this around now, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether toxic is quite the word. I mean, basically, Kwasi has dumped Liz in a tremendous hole because of his so-called mini budget, and he can't be entirely blamed for that because she knew about it. He obviously cleared everything with her. He knew what was coming. She knew what was coming. But neither of them predicted the extraordinary reaction of the markets and also the Tory party, forget the Labour Party. And I think she's obviously been shocked by that. Or he's been shocked by that, I'm sure, but she's been particularly shocked by that. She's got the top job. She's more political than Kwasi. She sees that her job is threatened. She wouldn't be... she wouldn't be human if she didn't blame Kwasi a bit. But I mean, her hand and Kwasi's hand were jointly on the tiller. There's no question about that.
And what do you make of Kwasi Kwarteng in this role, Stephen Glover? Because you've known him for over 25 years, but you have been critical in recent weeks, it's fair to say.
Yeah, I first met him when he was a sort of brilliant undergraduate at Cambridge about 25 years ago. And the thing about Kwasi is he is outstandingly brilliant academically, and in a way that probably no other member of the House of Commons is. He was the cleverest boy at Eton. He won the top academic prize at Eton. He did very well at Cambridge, got a first at Cambridge, then went to Harvard, came back, and did a PhD at Cambridge. He's very, very bright. But the trouble is he's been told all his life that he's very, very bright. And I think it's made him feel a little superior to the rest of us. Maybe he's a lot brighter than Liz Truss, by the way. It's made him feel a little bit superior to the rest of us, and his head is a bit in the clouds, and he maybe isn't sensitive enough to the way that ordinary people think and act, and that's the danger. Basically, he's got a kind of academic's view of the world rather than a politician's view of the world, and that could be very dangerous.
So what does Truss need to do in order to bring him back on side, present a united front, or are you in the camp, Stephen Glover, of she's got to sack him?
No, if she sacks him, she almost sacks herself. I mean,
yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
They're bound too close together, even if she may be irritated or slightly exasperated, or more than slightly exasperated with the way things are going. She's got to stick with him and hope that he becomes a little bit more political, a little bit more attuned to the way people are thinking, and gets his head down from the clouds a bit. I mean, she's not going to be, in my view, even if she wants to go ahead and link the rise in benefits, not with inflation, but with wages. Well, we know that's what she wants to do. She's not going to be able to do that. I mean, that's just kind of force majeure. There are enough people in the Tory party, plus Labour and the rest of them, to vote against that. So she's going to have to climb down. I'm almost certain about that. And he'll have to accept that too.
So two U-turns from the new Iron Lady within 2 weeks. Oh, my goodness, it has not been a great start. And I say this, obviously, as someone who desperately wants Liz Truss and this administration to succeed.
So do I. But it has been a pretty bad start, let's face it.
No, it has. It has. Even we have to admit that. Stephen Glover, thank you so much. Great to chat to you. But it's time now to reveal tonight's greatest Britain in Union Jackass. And with me to reveal, there's my superstar panel, Benjamin Butterworth. Let's kick off with you. Who is your greatest Britain tonight?
Mine is the BBC journalist Hugo Bachega, but also all of those journalists who are still in Ukraine, because this morning there was that terrible news of the attacks on Kyiv and other cities, and this particular BBC journalist was live on air as it happened, and it was a real reminder that,
I think we have this moment,
reporters
actually.
are so brave.
More than a dozen.
Goodness me. Belinda Lucy, your nominee.
My greatest Britain today is Sajid Javid, actually. He raised awareness today, a very brave article about suicide and highlighting the need for more prevention of suicide. Someone commits suicide in the UK every 90 minutes, and 2/3 of these are men, and not enough is done to prevent it. So big up to Sajid today for highlighting this.
And Carol Malone, your nominee.
OK, my greatest Britain is the lady called Mary. Now, I'm going to tell you her surname yet, but she was born in Basildon in Essex. She moved to New Zealand when she was 2 years old. She became a teacher, a great teacher, and was so passionate about children's education and how they learned literacy and how they learned that she set up her own education consultancy. She's been in New Zealand ever since that time. She has a husband called John, and she has a daughter called Ashley. But the most interesting thing is this Great Britain has produced one of our greatest Britons. And if I tell you that Mary's surname is Wootton, that'll give you a clue of who she is. This is Dan Wootton's mum, Mary. Here she is.
And she is going to kill me so much for this, but I am So happy to have my mum in the studio tonight because I'm going away for a few days and she is the reason why. It's her fault. But Mum and I, we haven't really got to spend any time together, have we, Mum, over the past 3 years because of the borders being shut and me being over here and you being in New Zealand. So we're going away for just a few days together. So I'm back next week. But Mum, it's so amazing to have you here.
Can I just also say,
Carol.
she's
Yes.
the good-looking one in the family.
Oh, my goodness,
Point that out.
Mum, you've always been asked if you're my sister, aren't you?
Oh, it's true. You look gorgeous.
But do you want to embarrass me now, Mum? Anything you want to say on national television?
Oh, gosh. Well, I was just telling a story out there how you used to record your own television and radio
Oh, don't.
in your
Stop.
bedroom when you were 10. So you were always destined to do something like this.
Oh, God, yeah.
Always going to get ribbed about that 4 months.
That is true. But no, my mum is the best. I know everyone says it, but it is true with me. My mum is the best mum in the world. I would be absolutely nothing without her today. So it is so
And I'm
amazing,
very
Mum,
proud of you, Daniel.
to have you here. And I love you so much. So thank you, Mum. And of course, you're my greatest Britain. I couldn't choose anyone else. And there we were. We were arriving at the airport. So anyway, I am going to be off for a few days with my mum, and I hope you forgive me for that. But thank you so much, Mum. Thank you, Carol, too. But after that little moment of joy, Carol Malone, turn nasty now. Who's your Union jackass?
OK, right, mine is completely opposite end of the scale. Nicola Sturgeon. This woman is dangerous. What she said about hating the Tories is very likely to incite violence. The woman needs to just behave like the statesman she's supposed to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And of course, that was the subject of my digest tonight. She is now inciting hatred and she must be called out for it. Belinda DeLucy, your nominee.
My jackass is along the same theme as Carol's. It's an SNP Equalities Officer, 23-year-old Cameron Downing, who has threatened to beat the F out of TERFs, a.k.a. women who want single-sex spaces. And it just continues the rhetoric of violence and aggression from the left against people who don't agree with them.
And Benjamin Butterworth, your Union Jackass nominee.
My honorary Union Jackass is Kanye West, or Ye, as he calls himself now. There's an endless list of reasons you could name him, but this particular one is that he posted an anti-Semitic remark on Twitter and on Instagram, and his account's being locked isn't an attack on free speech, it's stopping someone posting hateful, racist content online.
This is such an interesting one for me, though, because, look, I absolutely agree with you that the comments were disgraceful, but I really believe, Benjamin, we've got to live in a world where we can have these sorts of debates on free speech without immediately rushing to try and deplatform and to ban people. And I think Kanye has a lot to contribute. This was obviously a really horrific comment. I'm not in the path of let's just remove them from all platforms. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I think what he said was clearly anti-Semitic, and if you don't have the boundaries of being actually racist or explicitly homophobic, for example, then where do you draw it?
I know, but of course we do know the Chinese government remain on Twitter spreading their propaganda about the Uyghur Muslims. We do know that the Afghani government and the Taliban remain on Twitter. Donald Trump has banned. So I just don't like this whole thing. I agree with what you're saying about the comments. I don't like this thing of let's always rush to ban. Look, I'm going to go with Carol Malone, though. Of course, Nicola Sturgeon is today's Union Jackass. Double win for Carol Malone.
Hey.
I'm off with my mum for just a few short days. Mark Dolan will be here. So you'll be looked after by him. I'm back next Thursday night. Thank you so much for your company. Good night.
Hello, Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Clear spells for many overnight, and that means, of course, it will be chilly in places, particularly in the south, whilst a bit more of a breeze and showers continue in the north, especially for northern Scotland and the northwest of Scotland, where tight isobars remain just to the south of an area of low pressure moving into Norway. And it's in this area where we'll see further spells of cloud and showers overnight, along with a keen breeze. A bit more shelter there for the east of Scotland, as well as for much of England and Wales, Northern Ireland, keeping clear spells overnight as well. So where we get the clear spells, temperatures into the mid or even low single figures, and perhaps for some of the more sheltered spots across central parts of England, 0 degrees. So certainly a cold start to the day on Tuesday. Milder for the northwest of Scotland, where we'll see further showers from the word go. They'll also affect parts of Northern Ireland. And then those showers turning to perhaps more persistent rain later in the afternoon. We'll also see 1 or 2 showers for southern Scotland, northern England, but further south, dry, with plenty of sunny spells, particularly in the south of England and South Wales, with 15 or 16 Celsius and with light winds as well. So feeling quite pleasant here. 13 or 14 degrees for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it does turn increasingly wet into the evening with spells of rain pushing in from the Atlantic, heavy and persistent over Western Hills. A bit more ragged in its appearance there across eastern Scotland and northern England, North Wales. So I think the rain on and off through the night, but certainly by dawn, many places seeing thick cloud and outbreaks of rain, and 10 degrees because of the cloud cover. But chilly start for East Anglia and the southeast, as well as the East Midlands. Low single figures possible in some sheltered spots. However, it's here where we'll keep the sunny spells into Wednesday afternoon, whilst the area of rain in the north pushes into northern England, eventually the North Midlands, as well as parts of Wales, and tends to peter out. Thursday and Friday look very unsettled with strong winds, showers and longer spells of rain.